Okay, let's get started. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to explain the operating sequence of the stove and what happens and when it happens. First thing you do is plug in the stove, and that's down here at the power cord. Side down, right side up, plug that in. Okay, now when you get that plugged in, you'll notice that that control box is blinking. That'll be a series of blinks from 1 to 6, and that tells you where the box is set. Each stove has its own different setting. Down in this little hole here, there's a dial with numbers on it that tells you what stove setting the box is on. There's one box, covers a whole advanced or original energy series. One nice thing about this stove is when you plug it in, it assumes that there's fire in the stove, and the exhaust blower, this thing, will run for 8 minutes to evacuate all the smoke out of the stove. So that's an easy way to test and see if that blower is running. Just unplug the stove, plug it back in. But what happens on the system is the main thing, the main switch is the thermostat. Now when you turn the thermostat up, there's a little red light here by the control box that comes on. Now that signals that light just tells you what the thermostat is saying. The stove is calling for heat. When it calls for heat, it goes into what is called startup mode. Now the startup mode basically is this. The startup mode, the auger will run. Now the auger's back in here. This auger with the white label on it, that'll run for about 30 seconds, and what that does is that puts a load of pellets in your hopper. The igniter down on the bottom of the stove and in here will glow for about 6 minutes, and then that's all that'll happen. Now that's a startup. So what it does, the thermostat calls for heat, the feed motor runs, the igniter glows red, and that's all. Now what's supposed to happen is the pellets are loaded in the pot, they start burning, and that triggers the next sequence. And the next sequence is triggered by this thing here. That little finger in the pot is the thermocouple. Inside of that is the actual thermocouple. That's just a cover. The thermocouple is a wire. Dissimilar metals. What that does is when you heat that up, it generates current. Now that current goes out through the bottom of the stove and comes out here in a red and yellow wire. That red and yellow wire tells the control box that we have ignition. Now when that thermocouple heats up, if you look inside this box, you'll be able to see a series of lights. There's a red light and a green light. The green light comes on at 400 degrees. The red light comes on when the thermocouple is 600 degrees, and basically that tells the stove that we have power. Now, or we have fire. Then, when it hits the red light, now the green, when it hits the red light, what happens is it goes into run mode. It knows it has fire, so the auger turns back on, the igniter turns off, and then it just runs until the thermostat says, hey, cut it out, and then it shuts down. So, it's real simple. Thermostat calls for heat, the auger motor comes on for a little bit, the igniter comes on for a little bit. If we have fire and this thermocouple heats up, then it goes into, the auger turns back on, the igniter turns off, and then it just runs until the thermostat says, hey, that's enough, cut it out, we're shutting down. And that's the operating procedure of the stove. It's pretty simple. And then we'll go on to some components from here that do part by part description. Okay, thank you.